welcome everyone to the ASHB, formerly CABA, the Continental Automated Buildings Association, a quarterly IBC webinar meeting. My name is Marta Kloptowska, and I'll be emceeing the slides today. I just want to mention to everyone that the meeting today, or the webinar meeting today, is being recorded and will be circulated to those who registered and for those who could not attend. And with that, I will pass it on to Bob Allen, who will go over the agenda today and get us going.
Great, thanks, Marta. I appreciate that. So we have a great agenda today. A little bit different format than we've had in a few of the meetings past, but do the administrative work, the call to order. We'll have a research update, and then a great panel discussion to talk about how to get to net zero using technology, creating that roadmap, decarbonizing in the building operations. That'll be moderated by James Dice, and we'll have Linden Steffens, Raj Subramanian, and Brian Vaughn as panelists on that for that section. Then we'll go into the some info on the ASHB podcast as well, followed by the journal, an update from Ken Wax on the sub-paper committees, the white paper subcommittee update, and then we'll wrap up with new business announcements and an adjournment from there. So with that, I'd like to make a call to order. First, we'd like to welcome, for those who don't know me, Bob Allen. I'm the IBC chair. I'm with Navco Security Systems. Along with me are our vice chairs, Handra Chandrasekhar from Honeywell, Bob Lane from Robert H. Lane and Associates, and Chris Larry, Director of Energy Engineering at EXP US Services. So thank you guys for joining us again today and all the work that you do behind the scenes to put together. So I think it's great. We have a new name, ASHB. What a wonderful announcement a few weeks ago, and this is our first meeting since then. The IBC has not changed its title. We are still the Intelligent Building Council, and our job is to strengthen the large building automation industry through innovative technology-focused research projects. And this dates all the way back to 2001. The IBC reviews market opportunities, takes strategic action, and monitors initiatives that relate to integrated systems and automation in our large building sector. The Council's projects promote the next generation of intelligent building technologies and incorporate a holistic approach that optimizes building performance and savings. And it gives everybody on the call a great opportunity to be participants in the industry, which we'll talk about later when it comes to the white papers and the research projects. So with that, I would like to call the meeting to order. Can I have anybody motion that?
David Katz moves to call the meeting to order.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Chris Larry seconds.
Thank you, Chris. Hearing none opposed, we are now in order. First order of business is to talk about our past meeting minutes. They are published on the website at www.ashb.com/IBC. The meeting notes are listed there, going back to our meeting on May 30th, 2023. I would like to make a call for a motion to approve those minutes. Ken, was that a motion?
So moved.
Perfect. Do I have a second for that?
I second the motion. I was on the meeting. David
Thank
Katz.
you. Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, the motion passes and the minutes are now approved. Okay. Marta, let's dive into our research update.
Thanks, Bob. So this is a little bit different from previous years. Our 2023 IBC Landmark Research Project for this year will be focused on intelligent building technology and market trends. And I did mention it's a little bit different, so I'll get into that shortly. So the project has garnered support from 16 funders thus far, and you'll see those on the screen. We just like to thank our funders for their invaluable support and the guidance on this project. So earlier this year, an RFP went out to our ASHB member research firms, leading to the selection of Harbor Research by the initial funders. The project is, as I mentioned, slightly different. Rather than producing a single comprehensive report spanning approximately 200 pages and centering around a single topic, we're adopting a different approach this year. The project will be deconstructed into a series of 3 smaller focused research projects. These will be presented in the form of insightful presentations accompanied by the raw data, and each sub-project will involve approximately 100 hours of analyst dedication. The survey will target 250 commercial building owners, operators in Canada and in the US, and will cover key topic / opportunities to gain an annual perspective of operator needs and outlook. The research will utilize both industry expert interviews and consumer surveys. Topic selection for the sub-projects will be conducted by the steering committee. As these reports are completed, they'll be subsequently released. And it's essential to note that these projects, collectively valued at approximately $80,000 US, will have an exclusive release to the project funders. And there's two distinct funding tiers. There's the bronze, priced at $5,000 USD, which grants access to the research findings and any presentations, raw data. And then the silver, priced at $10,000, which will enable participation on the steering committee and shaping of the project's direction. Now, we may be at the point now where it may be too late to join at the steering or at the silver level, but if you are interested, please just let us know, and we'll reach out to Harbor Research, and they'll be able to, let us know if we are able to add in any silver funders. But the bronze funding level is certainly available and open to any organizations. And for those that are interested in joining, please let us know. You can email us at admin@ashb.com, or you can contact Greg Walker directly at walker@ashb.com. And with that, I will pass it on to Harsha to introduce James Dice, our panel moderator for today. Oh, I think Harsha is not on the call today. My apologies. With that, I will actually just pass it along to James to introduce our topic today. And to introduce our panel members, and then shortly after the Q&A session. James?
I will kick us off, and I can happy to introduce myself rather than having someone introduce me. So I'm founder and CEO of Nexus Labs. We started in 2019. So we produce educational content and community events aimed at, similar to what you guys do at ASHB, is accelerating the transition to digital and decarbonized buildings. I have a great panel today. I will introduce the three of you guys, and then I'll ask you to sort of introduce yourselves as well, as far as your experience on the topic today. So what we're going to talk about is decarbonization, but using software for decarbonization, and the role of software platforms in the decarbonization roadmap. I'm going to kick us off with a few slides, and then we're going to do a discussion as we go. If you could, in the audience, put any questions for us in the Q&A section down at the bottom. You just click Q&A at the bottom of your window, and we'll hopefully have some time for questions at the end. Marta, what time did you want us to conclude this, just so I can manage our time as we so panelists today, we have Raj Subramanian. He's CTO and co-founder at Facilio. Raj, you want to introduce yourself a little bit more about how you guys sort of aid in the decarbonization process?
Sure, happy to. So I'm the head of products, chief product officer for Facilio. So Facilio is a cloud operations platform for building operations, maintenance, and efficiency. So what we're essentially doing is we're removing the bottleneck of traditional automation systems at the building level, and by enabling some of that functionality on the cloud, we enable interoperability, data interoperability, and application interoperability. That in turn enables a lot of use cases for today's needs for smart buildings around net zero, overall operational efficiency, occupant experience, so on and so forth. Right. So that's what Facilio does. I'm happy to talk more, share more as we go along. James, is that a...
Yep, perfect. I'll go next to Brian Vaughn. He's Senior Director, Global Innovation and Digital Advisory at Cushman Wakefield. Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, James. Yes, I'm Brian Vaughn. I have 15 years around technology in the CRE space, a variety of different roles from consulting, engineering, product management, etc. Excited that my current role at C&W allows me to bring together this varied experience so I can help our colleagues and our clients better understand how to incorporate technology into our operations. So C&W provides a variety of different services across real estate, from transaction, our brokerage teams, our valuation, property management, engineering and maintenance. And then our emerging technologies group within that, our global innovation, is really tied to keeping tabs on like what's out there in the real estate technology marketplace, maintaining some of those relationships, and then helping foster those relationships within our organization. And then today, I'm just excited to participate to help provide our perspective on how we as an operator can adopt some software to help our decarbonization goals.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Okay, last but not least, Linden. So Linden's the solutions architect lead smart buildings and places at British Land. Linden, you want to talk about your decarbonization experience?
Yes, I work in the digital placemaking team. My role is to look at all the buildings that British Land own, which is £14 billion worth of property in London and some places outside of London, and look at how we can reduce the energy usage within those buildings using the cloud, smart platforms. Awesome. And our chosen partner to do that is Facilio. So I will talk about the work we do to help Facilio ingest our data and then write back to our systems to make our buildings run more efficiently.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into that case study. I'm going to kick us off with a few slides just to sort of set the tone here. And let me jump in. So I'm going to sort of kind of set the stage for us, but also if anyone's new to the decarbonization process or anyone's new to software's role in decarbonization, these slides will kind of introduce them to that as well. So this is the decarbonization roadmap that our community has developed through basically the process of me sharing my thoughts and then us getting feedback and tailoring that over time. So these steps have moved around. So if you've seen this graphic from us, they've moved a little bit since maybe the last time you've seen it. So I'm going to sort of walk us through this. So step 0 here, I guess, is really not a step in the decarbonization process, but market transformation is having a huge impact in cities across the world right now. And what we mean by that is benchmarking laws, disclosure laws that are requiring facility owners to react and avoid fines and really just try to mitigate the risk that these regulations are having on their properties. So I'd say that's happening first. And I think that there are a lot of owners out there that are in those municipalities that really that's the first step in sort of spurring action for them. Second step is getting data. We'll talk a little bit more about that today, but basically you need to figure out where you're at before you get started. Step 2, sometimes organizations do the step 2 first, which is setting your carbon target. Do you want to get to net zero? Do you want to get to carbon neutral? Do you want to get to 24/7 carbon-free energy? What is your target? Because that's then going to determine how you report. It's actually going to determine what data you need, right? If you need 24/7 carbon-free, then you need 24/7 energy monitoring to understand what you're doing today. Step 3 is reporting. So what stakeholders do you have in your facility or in your portfolio? How do you get the information out in terms of what your target is, what you're currently at, how you're doing on your progress, et cetera. Depending on how you set up your data at the beginning, the reporting is going to be easier or harder, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that today. Most organizations haven't really made it past this process of getting data, setting a target, reporting, no matter what order they're doing it. And I don't see a ton of progress in the step 4, which is action, analyzing how you can reduce your carbon emissions, retrofitting your buildings, verifying success, and then monitoring and controlling the building better. And then some organizations put step 5 up front. It's just offset the whole thing without doing everything I just said. But what we recommend, obviously, is it's going to be lower cost to offset your carbon, and a lot more real if you actually reduce your usage up front and then look at offsetting what you can't actually reduce in the end. So that's a generalized roadmap. We're going to sort of walk through the technology involved in that as we go here. So most of the time, the technology involved looks like this. You have different stakeholders across the organization with a bunch of different Excel spreadsheets. Obviously, we can improve upon that. That's kind of what Nexus is all about, and what we're going to talk about today. So if you look at this, it's a little bit of an eye chart, but if you look down at the bottom, it's that same 4-step process I just shared. So getting data, reporting, acting on it through a bunch of different steps, and then if you can't act on it, procuring and offsetting at the end. What we have here is a very fragmented technology marketplace. So these are the different software categories in the marketplace today. There are different companies, and we track all of these different companies. There are 5, 10, 15 different companies a lot of times in each of these categories. And so I've done a lot of interviewing building owners, sustainability teams, operations teams, and they look across their portfolio and they have either a spreadsheet for all of these different things, or they have some sort of point solution, some sort of software provider that provides a limited help along this journey to zero carbon. And what you have is just a lot of confusion around, well, if we buy this, that means it doesn't go over here and help us on this stage of the journey. And how do we send data to all of these different things, and how do we integrate them all together? So it's a little bit of a mess in the marketplace today, I'd say. And then I'll just end with what we sort of recommend and what our community sort of promotes is this horizontal architecture, where instead of having all of these different tools, all these different applications connecting to the building, you're having this horizontal approach where you have one converged network layer, one data layer, where you're able to provide all these connections to your building and all of these connections to the cloud. And then you have all of these different applications or one software application that provides all these different outcomes, but it's the same infrastructure that all of those applications are allowing. So it's a new approach rather than having all of these different applications connect all into your building, having your infrastructure more solid and converged and managed. With that, I'm going to stop my screen and we'll have a discussion. Hopefully that sets the stage for our chat here. So I'd really love to hear, just before we kick off, we're going to get into the British Land case study in just a second. Brian, can you talk about, you look across all of Cushman Wakefield's clients, all the different advisory services you're providing every day. Can you talk about those different categories of technologies that are sort of making up that sort of fragmented mess in the marketplace, and how you sort of help your clients kind of wade through that?
Sure. James, I think I'm happy you closed your screen, but I'm also somewhat regretting it, because maybe the pictures help us continue the conversation.
Oh, I can bring them back up.
Like those categories I agree with, and they exist. And I definitely feel some of the challenge that we get into is trying to talk about logos and where do they fit in those categories, rather than speaking about capabilities and what we're trying to solve for. A lot of times we're looking at the latest and greatest technology that's getting a lot of buzz on a webinar, or has a huge booth at ASHB or Realcomm, something of that nature. And we're trying to figure out how do we incorporate this. And a lot of what we do on the advisory side is really talking with the clients in terms of their operations, and our teams, like our operations teams, talking about how are they operating today and where are some of the ways that they can improve their operations piece, and then really trying to figure out what is that starting point to start picking technology and picking a spot to peel back the onion, to find the edge of the tape, whatever analogy you want to use. So for me, that's the biggest piece, is just trying to understand, where is there an opportunity? Where is there a gap? Where is there a program where, like, are they looking at a new software platform? Do they need to incorporate metering into their portfolio? Just looking for those current must-haves that we can use as that starting point.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And when you look across all of these, how would you sort of generalize where people are at in the roadmap today?
And I knew you were going to focus on that. I think, to me,
My goal today is to frustrate Brian as much as I can with all of my questions.
Try not to play this game, but here we are. So I would say, for me, the easiest place for us to start is on the software aspect, where we're just trying to get a better understanding of where we are with our operations teams and our clients, whether that is the data reporting piece, or is it, improving your CMMS platform, or utilizing it to help integrate some disparate systems into a analytics platform, so you can better triage and operate your portfolio. So I'd say those are the 3 different areas.
Okay, got it. Reporting, analytics, and what was the third one?
I thought you were writing these down, James.
But generally, you're basically just meeting people where they're at. What systems do you have today, and how can we augment that and take sort of the next step with it? It's not like you're like, we're laying out this entire roadmap. It's more like, let's meet you where you're at. What's the next step? And that ends up being something like analytics or reporting or metering, that kind of thing. Yeah,
and so you're right. It's CMMS, analytics, and the energy reporting piece. And the part that we do also talk about is the bigger architecture that you spoke of. And depending on where we're starting with this journey, like if we are looking at CMMS, we're not necessarily going to be looking at the integrations to the building systems yet. We might ignore some of those integration layers, et cetera. But if we are getting into, fault detection or analytics, we'll look at that IDL layer, or some of the integration layers, or converged network pieces, and maybe the software can help us in the near term, the interim, like right now, make up for some of the gaps in that area, so we can start getting some results, and then we can use those results to help justify investments into more permanent converged network solutions.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Raj, I'd love to hear sort of, I know you guys are very heavily aligned with kind of what I just described. I'd love to hear your reaction to it, and how you're kind of seeing things and the challenges your customers are seeing.
Yeah, sure. I love that architecture, layered architecture that you presented, and we use a very similar kind of device, network, data, and application horizontal architecture in our messaging as well. So the important thing is really a lot of the use cases around decarbonization, or even some of the other use cases around, occupant comfort, or health of the occupants, and things like that, and whatever may come, in the next few years or decades. All of this, it's important to realize that, realizing some of the role of software, first of all. Of course, there is a role for a lot of hardware retrofits and things like that to play a part, but there is definitely a role for software and cloud platforms. And I wanted to kind of bring some attention to that. And when you think about those use cases, the major bottleneck proves to be the traditional automation systems that we have on our buildings, because these systems are not really built for any kind of interoperability. And when we talk about interoperability, it's important to think about interoperability in 2 different spectrums, right? One is the data interoperability aspect. How do you capture data from these buildings and exchange data with these systems? The other one is application interoperability, right? Just to give you an example, if you have to, can you actually using, like, when you think of cloud first applications and how easy it is to integrate with the cloud software, so to speak, right? It's an API call. can you do an API call to your building automation system to change the schedule on that automation system? It's a simple ask, right? If I have to do demand-based scheduling and I want to control schedule or change the set point on this room where I'm sitting, if the room is not booked, can my calendar application call an API to the Honeywell system in the building to change that set point? No, right?
No.
So that's where it becomes really important to actually remove that bottleneck. And one way to remove that bottleneck is to actually think in terms of that architecture and how we set up a solution that basically removes or segregates the device from the data and application aspects of that solution. And then think in terms of cloud architecture and cloud first applications to solve that problem, right? So, and that's how we approach this problem and provide solutions. So I love that diagram, and we can chat more about it. I'm sure Linden has a lot. They have thought through this and come up with some really interesting solution architecture around the problems that they are trying to solve there.
Yeah, I want to add to that in just a second, but Linden, I wanted to ask you, can you talk about when you guys looked across your portfolio before deciding to go the cloud route? When we talked last week, you talked about the limitations of these local control systems. So setting schedules, sequences, integrating systems together. Can you talk a little bit about the limitations you had with your local control systems, whether it be HVAC, lighting, et cetera? You're muted, Linden.
The first thing that we came across as a problem is that if you looked at all the buildings and you looked at the BMS systems and the lighting systems, they come from different vendors and they all call the parameters by different names. So if you wanted to write something in the cloud to talk back to them, something could be called 3 or 4 different names across the portfolio. So you had to try and make that consistent, what is being reported to the cloud. Then also on top of it, you've got these parameters coming in, but they're not rich in properties. So in fact, they might give you the value unit of measure, but they won't give you the status or the event status of the parameter or the value. So therefore, you never know if you're getting a true reading or a stale reading or whether the sensor's down. So we had to look at all of that. So what we did, we had a 400,000 square foot building in central London, 100 Liverpool Street, fully commissioned and operational, running from a BMS system. And we said, we want to send that data to the cloud. What do we need to do to send it to the cloud? And so we partnered up with Facilio to send the data to the cloud. And the first step was understanding what assets do we have? What are the things that are generating data and being used by the BMS to control the spaces? So you had to have a catalogue of all your assets, your pressurization units, your degassers, your fan core units, your meters, all those kind of things. You need to capture a digital passport for all those things and then onboard them. And that helped us in a number of ways, because in getting the digital passport, you could also include the basis of design in that digital passport. So if you had a temperature sensor, you could put down what the temperature set point for that sensor was as basis of design. You could report that to the cloud. So ultimately, you're actually baselining the design for the building, and then you can start taking actions based on the baseline. You can look at the variance on the baseline. So all of that helped us. And on top of that, having a digital passport helped us record the life cycle of an asset. So if you've got some systems where you've got continuous failures, you can easily identify that because you have a digital passport. When something's replaced, a new passport takes its place, and you can look at the old passport and you can see how long did that actually last or what failed on it. You can even do integral to systems, where systems have got an asset and it has sub-assets, like a fan unit has a lot of sub-assets. You can look at its sub-assets and see how often they change. So the first thing was understanding what you have.
Got it. And if I'm hearing you correctly, when you don't have all these systems in the cloud, it's difficult to manage them. There's different vendors, there's different ways in which to display data and model data. So there's different interfaces, right? So the ability to sort of abstract all of that away is why you looked at going to sort of a centralized cloud provider. One of the things that's interesting as I hear all three of you talk, right, is I think a lot of people don't realize, and I'm just going to pull this back up real quick. I think when you look at this graph and you think about how can software help for decarbonization, most people think about the entire left side of the chart. So you think about carbon accounting, you think about ESG reporting, you think about doing stuff with your utility data, whether it be analyzing it for benchmarking, et cetera. Not a lot of people think about the right side of the chart, which is everything going on at the site level, right? And so when I just asked you guys, like, what do you think about software for decarbonization? None of you talked about the left side. All of you talked about the sort of right side of things. Brian, you did mention ESG reporting, definitely, but you're kind of keying in on the operations of the building. You're keying in on how can we control things better with supervisory control. You're keying in on analyzing system data to do things like fault detection analytics, that kind of thing. Do you guys think that the sort of right side, the site level, is overlooked when we talk about decarbonization? Anybody can sort of take that.
Oh, I think it's what most people talk about, because I think we're falling into that piece right now. And David Katz threw a question in the chat. I think, are we allowed to answer this right now, or do we have to wait?
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Because he's asking about decarbonization is reducing fossil fuels, but it might require more electricity. So I like, so he's asking how do you approach this different challenge? And to me, what we're hitting on, James, is how we're using software to address those things on the right hand side. And something that has come apparent to me, my Boston SMOT group for building intelligence, we've toured Boston University's new net zero building. We were just going over some plans with CBT architects about a new project coming up that's going to be net zero. And one of the key things that they've always talked about there was the envelope, right? Like reducing the need, like reducing the energy requirements of the building are going to reduce the amount of energy that they have to offset or have to produce or utilize, which is going to help with the decarbonization piece. So I think a lot of times when we're talking about the software piece and how we're getting into, how's a VAV performing, how's a boiler performing, all those other things, it's really about like reducing the energy requirements. So there's less to offset or less to, purchase from renewable sources. So to me, that we do get stuck in that a lot. But I think the other part that the software layer is going to enable us to do, and Raj, you can speak to this, or Linden, how you guys might be targeting this in your spaces, but we're going to start getting more information about like how green are our different energy sources at any different point in time. How are we going to tie that into our antiquated systems at our buildings? And I think the easiest way to do that is through a software layer like Facilio to broker those set point changes based on analysis that we're seeing from our utility sources, right?
Got it. Raj, anything to add there?
Yeah, my observation is, while this gets discussed in some of the new building construction design type scenarios, it gets ignored a lot when it comes to existing building stock, right? And I probably think there's not enough mind share in terms of what is possible in existing buildings when it comes to net zero energy optimization, without doing all the retrofits and what's outside of the building, energy procurement and all of that, right? So so that's probably like you can do a lot with if you remove the bottlenecks of the existing systems, are actually imagine a solution that can reduce those risks, or some of the problems that exist, to then you can start imagining what the possibilities are. And that some of like things like FDD, which is very basic, right? You're not even controlling anything there, but even those things actually get ignored for the most part.
Got it. Yeah, and I think a lot of what we're about to talk about is the case study with British Land, but I kind of set the stage for that. A lot of people don't realize the connections to operations. So like when Brian talks about a CMMS and you just talk about fault detection, Raj, that's really getting into the back of the house, the operations of the building. And those are totally separate stakeholders than you might have at the portfolio level when you talk about a sustainability manager or an energy engineer. So really a lot of the software world where we need to get to is we start to bridge those gaps internally. So between the sustainability folks and between the on-site operations folks, kind of what Linden, seems like Linden's doing from a technology standpoint at British Land. So let's talk about that, the sort of case study that we're going to dive into. Raj, can you kind of set the stage for all the things you guys are working on? And then we'll go to you, Linden, next to talk about sort of the use cases that you guys have enabled.
Sure. Maybe I'll just show a quick slide. So give me a second. All right, just one slide to about that provides summary of the solution that we deployed in British Land using Facilio's connected operations platform. It's a cloud overlay solution for portfolio-wide analytics and optimization, right? And it basically integrates all of the different automation systems at the building level. And on the analytics side of things, there are plenty of fault detection diagnostic rules that are applied for insights into asset operations and asset lifecycle. There are several optimization strategies that we've deployed for energy conservation and energy efficiency, right? Some of the use cases are listed there. Linden can definitely talk more about the impact it has created in terms of the outcomes and also possibly the use cases, but I'm happy to, if there are any kind of deeper nitty-gritties around how the solution works and things like that, I'm happy to dive in there.
Cool. Yeah, Linden, let's just start with that first use case. And we have about 7 minutes left before we need to get to Q&A. Let's start with that first use case, the occupancy-based dynamic HVAC and lighting scheduling. Can you talk about how that works?
Yeah, so within any space, meeting room or common areas, all the assets within that space, whether it be a luminaire, fan coil unit, VFE box, reports 2 messages to Facilio. It says who I am via its digital passport, which we call metadata. And then it also sends a measured value payload, which is the dynamic data. So Facilio are able to ingest that, and it's got a number of parameters, some of which are just read only, some of what are read and write. So then in the room booking system, Facilio also get that data, and they get occupancy data for those spaces. So depending on the occupancy levels, if there's nobody in those spaces, particularly meeting rooms, Facilio are able to reduce the lighting level from the cloud, or they can widen the dead band on a VAV box set point or a fan coil unit and let the asset sleep more. So it doesn't actually run and try and maintain the desired temperature of the space, but allows the temperature to either be colder or hotter, depending on the time of season. And then it sees a booking coming in, then it makes the dead band smaller and the system comes to life and it starts bringing the space up to the desired temperature. So that's how they were able to use occupancy to drive the performance of a particular asset. And we're starting to see the meter readings on our heat interface units come down because of it. They're not using as much energy because the system is sleeping more, the valves are closing more, and then we end up using less boilers because of it. So we've got 7 boilers, but using this system that they have now, we find that we're only using maybe 2 or 3 boilers throughout a day. They can look at all those kind of things from us because everything is reporting. So they can say, okay, you don't need to be doing that because there's no one in the building today, or there's no one in that meeting room, or that meeting room is not due to have anybody in there for another 3-4 hours. So let's run it a little bit warmer than it should be for this time of the year.
Right. And I think a lot of people understand that decarbonization, the easiest thing is to start shutting stuff off. But a lot of times when you have centralized air handlers, centralized boiler systems, like you're saying, it's very difficult to you can't shut the whole building off, right? Because you have partial occupancy here and there. So what you guys are talking about here is actually tailoring the operation of each room based on
Yeah.
occupancy in that room, which is, I think, a huge area for improvement across the industry. What do you say?
But see, the way we build is like you've got central water, this secondary water that pumps around the building, but they go through heat interface units. So that is, or plate exchanger. So that is the exchange between the heat produced centrally and what's required in the particular zone or space. And that has a valve on it. So you can actually bypass the heat interface unit. So therefore there's no heat exchange being carried out for that particular space, and you're saving energy. Also from their platform, we've been able to identify when a valve is stuck open, when it's 100% open, when it shouldn't be. And so you're wasting energy because of that. You know, that valve is now reporting information about itself. Facilio can see, why is that valve at 100% when it shouldn't be at this, you know, based on the ML that they've applied, or the real logic that's, you know, they can see return air temperatures being much higher than they should be for the space. That means that space is not being controlled properly, and they can go right down to the level of what has failed, and they can generate workflows for someone to investigate and carry out replacements. And remember, because everything's got a digital passport, we know exactly what the part needs to be. And so in Raj's slide, he had MTTR, mean time to repair. That's all sped up because of the fact that you have a digital passport and you know what the device is. So you don't have to go through O&M manuals or go through CAFM tickets to try and find out what is the part you need. It's already in the cloud. It can say that part has failed, please change that part.
Totally. Yeah, that's huge. So we got about a couple of minutes left before we do Q&A here. So Raj, I'd love for you to talk about, so we're talking about scheduling and controls. We're talking about FDD and mean time to resolution. You guys also have this use case, space insights for better planning. Can you talk about all these different user personas for the different software? So I think the key thing to point out here is, like we showed on the architecture slide, there's all these different sources of data, all these different ways in which that data, that same data, can be produced and shown and enabled to these different stakeholders across the organization, right? Whether they're in space planning, or they're in facilities, or they're in energy engineering or sustainability. Can you talk about how you approach that from a cloud software perspective?
Yeah, sure. So in British Land's case, you know, they operate some of the spaces, like I call it Story, which is a flex office offering. So they occupy that space, and it becomes important for them to actually be able to monitor usage and utilization of all the meeting rooms that are booked and not used, and desks that are occupied, and things like that, right? So so the data that we capture, it's not just limited to HVAC and lighting. You can, as long as you are able to capture different data, you can capture attendance data, you can capture occupancy data from sensors, from other systems, turnstiles and whatnot, right? So the space insights piece is all about presenting that data, and that data could be useful to your workplace coordinators, even the building occupants in some cases, to find out which rooms, like if all rooms are booked and you're not able to find a room, but you can find what are the rooms that are not utilized right now, things like that, right? So depending on the context and the data that is available, you can better serve different stakeholders in the value chain, right? So obviously we know a lot of obvious things around ESG data being useful for your sustainability and portfolio level stakeholders. A lot of the FDD type data is very, very useful, and insights are useful for building engineers and operators. So and we have had other customers use it for tenant, better informing tenants and better engaging vendors that they operate with and work with. So there is no end to it, irrespective of what stakeholder it is, you can actually find ways to source and serve insights to that particular stakeholder if you have the right solution architecture in place.
Yeah, totally. Brian, do you have any reactions to this project based on what you're seeing across your portfolios?
I think it's one of the traditional ways that we see people trying to leverage this type of tool set, improving what they have in their space because they realize it's a they have various types of systems, and the easiest place to start taking action is by integrating those into a software-based platform. So, this is definitely something that we would likely recommend, and we've recommended it to clients who have potentially looked at various solutions, like trying to get a homogeneous control system across their portfolio. And this approach saves a significant amount of money and allows you to get access to these insights much faster, which then I think gives you a better insight or recommendations in terms of how you leverage your capital to make improvements at the edge.
Totally. All right, let's go to the Q&A. Linden, I see you typing in answers. I wanted to ask you the question that you already answered in the chat real quick and just sort of ask you to expand upon it. Can you talk about you guys using an MSI? And it seems like a master systems integrator, for those that don't know that acronym. It sounds like for new projects, you're sort of going away from the MSI model. Linden, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah, because the controllers now, they've all caught up. So they can take the BACnet IP points that they get, or BACnet MSDP points that they have within the controller, and they can place it into a JSON document. So they can group the points, put them in a JSON, because that's the beauty of JSON, that you don't get individual points like in BACnet. You get one data exchange format that captures all the points for a particular asset. So you do asset by asset, and then you send it as MQTT to a broker on premise. So now the BMS controller is doing two jobs. It's reporting its BACnet IP points to the BMS supervisor, but it's also sending a JSON document, MQTT, of the same points, not all the points, because we looked at another project and there was tens of thousands of points in BACnet that was created for running the BACnet systems. But there's only a few points that we really want. We probably only want about 20% of all the data. So therefore, that's the opportunity to say, pick that point, pick that point, pick that point. The most important thing about use, and I'm kind of a little bit off of, do we use an MSI? Moving forward, the BACnet system engineers or the BMS system engineers have the capability to produce the JSON. And that's why we no longer need an MSI. You probably only need an MSI for some of those systems like the access control, but even they now can report using JSON. They don't really use MQTT, but you can use an API, HTTPS GET, to grab the data from their systems, and then you can send them to the broker using a soft JSON. So again, anyone with JSON capability is now able to send JSON over MQTT. So that's where we are. That's where we are at the moment. That's the maturity of the market at the moment. It reduces a lot of costs, and it keeps the one person doing both jobs, as opposed to the overhead of an MSI coming in and trying to understand how the BMS has been done, and then instructing them, you need to include these properties when you create a point, because the point can give you lots of properties, and there are mandated properties or required properties in the ASHB guide, most of which are always ignored. So now we're saying to the BMS guy, do the BMS work properly, use BACnet properly, give us these properties. And these are the properties that Facilio use to stop making false reports.
Okay. Okay, so there's 3 questions left. I think we got 5-10 minutes left. So let's try to get through these kind of in a choppy fashion. On this case study, how was occupancy determined? Can you guys talk about that? And let me expand on that question a little bit, because I think there's some complexity here, right? You could have occupancy from a traditional occupancy sensor. You guys could use it from the access control system. You could use it from a bunch of different places, right? So how did you guys figure out, is there someone in this room right now? And did you guys use occupancy counting? I'd love for you to sort of
We've got Behringer sensors. We've got Behringer sensors all around the building, and they pick up the occupancy of people in the space. Even some of the lighting luminaires have multi-sensors that also can pick up occupancy. We didn't find that as reliable as a Behringer sensor, though. So the Behringer sensor then sends data to Facilio, and Facilio use that. They understand what room is being monitored from the sensor, and they understand what unit is in that same space as well. So from that, they can make a determination of what should happen with the assets within that space.
Anything to add there, Raj?
Not really, but for other clients, we've done picked up occupancy from turnstiles, from Wi-Fi infrastructure in some cases, and places like that. Whatever you have, whatever data set you have available, in some buildings even have the luxury of occupancy sensors all over the place, right? So you may do with what is available.
All right, I'd love for all of us to answer this. I'll go to you, Brian, to answer it first. Would British Land have been able to achieve similar results by utilizing the BMS as a centralized platform to perform all of this? And we're talking about bringing all these different building systems together, FDD, optimization. Talk about that. I think that's a common question.
I'll answer that first.
Okay, go ahead.
If it's the same BMS,
trying to get Brian some airtime here.
No, but if it's the same BMS engineer, yeah, great. We're dealing with a portfolio of projects, and every BMS engineer works differently, writes a control strategy differently, writes the parameters differently. So every job you're starting from scratch. If you just said use the cloud and be consistent what you tell the cloud to do, then you can optimize the buildings, a portfolio. A single building, sure, BMS can do that. You've got the Niagara platform, very powerful, can do a lot of stuff. But I'm talking about this building, then the next building, then the next building, then the next building. There's 14 billion pounds worth of buildings here.
So, James, I think anybody who's ever heard me speak before will know what I'm about to say. It's can do and do. And to me, it's like you can do most of this stuff within a BMS, right? There's no reason you need a cloud platform to do occupancy strategies. There's no reason why you need them to optimize set points within your chilled water loops. All those things can be done in your BMS. The thing is that they're not doing it necessarily. And oftentimes to figure out that those aren't happening requires a software platform like this. And then B, a lot of times the easiest thing to do is to use a software platform to solve the problem today, with the intent that at some point when you're going to retrofit that system, replace it, update the chiller plant, whatever the case may be, you know that there's an opportunity to re-engineer, which hits on somebody's, I think Scott's comment about basis for design and re-engineering brownfield sites. It's like these things help identify like what those opportunities are when you're coming up on capital projects, what you want to incorporate. Because honestly, to me, it's better to run these things more locally, have application specific controllers that are, banging out sequences reliably based on what they're told to do from, whether it's locally managed systems or cloud-based systems. I think the key thing is anything that we're doing in the cloud, you can do on the BMS, but it's just easier to do in the cloud. And then, like Ajit was commenting on, electricity in 24-hour periods, like how that varies. That's going to be a lot harder to do in the BMS. Could you do it? Sure. Would I want to even try that? Probably not. But I think that gets into the can do scenario too. I think that's definitely something that these platforms can do in terms of like monitoring for like the different emission factors throughout the day. But I don't think there's a lot of platforms that are actually doing that today. And
I'd love to hear, Raj, how are you thinking about that piece? So I think I'll show, or I won't show the graphic real quick, but the potential here is that when you have one centralized cloud platform, that platform can then connect into the local, whatever data source you need to get into to understand the local carbon emissions. And then you could start controlling systems based on that. Raj, it's probably a future looking item, but have you guys thought about that?
I'm sorry, I lost the last bit of Brian's comment, and I think you continued from there. So is that a specific use case you want me to touch upon?
Yeah, just basically controlling systems based on what the carbon emissions in the grid are at that particular hour of the day.
Okay, yeah, so it again comes back to the challenge of interoperability, right? And this basically, you could do the same thing in BMS. It's just that it's so damn hard to integrate BMS into any other system, right? Even like if you have to do occupancy data integration with BMS, not just, there is license restriction, there are protocol restrictions, there are engineering restrictions, in all sorts of restrictions that becomes a bottleneck, right? And if you have to do grid interoperability, it's same, right? So even picking up simple things like demand response signals and incorporating some schedule changes in BMS is so hard because these systems are not built for interoperability, and that's what that's the bottleneck that gets removed in a cloud-based platform on cloud first solution architecture, right? So you think about interoperability and you design for interoperability, not just for today's use cases, but there are plenty of use cases like that. Grid interoperability, for example, it's not a reality right now. We're talking about it as a concept. Maybe there are a few pilots and quite a few deployments, maybe, but it's not widespread. And when it gets widespread, it's not going to get widespread if everybody tried to do it with BMS as a platform.
Totally. Okay, we got 5 minutes left. I'd love for us all to just take a turn and talk about if I'm a building owner watching this right now, how do I get started with this? What's the sort of biggest hurdle with getting these concepts implemented in real buildings? Linden, I'll start with you. If you were talking to, instead of your colleagues at British Land, another landlord within the UK, what would you tell them, and what are the biggest hurdles facing them as they sort of adopt this cloud-based model?
Understanding what you've got. Understand what went into the building in terms of your engineering systems. Understanding your control strategies that were implemented in the buildings. Look at how your building was commissioned. Was it commissioned to your design, or were changes made during commissioning to get the system tuned? Capture that change and report it, and then see how it's meant to operate and what you probably could fine tune.
Got it. That's a good place to start. Brian, what about you?
I have a couple things I wanted to hear, but I'm trying to be considerate of time, which I realize I just wasted. I think there's skepticism that is somewhat driven by people's can-do mentality, which is great to have, but sometimes it forces people to sell solutions that they shouldn't necessarily be inserting their solution for. So I think that leads to the skepticism aspect, and it makes it harder for people to purchase or make that decision to procure. There's some different budgets that are at war with each other within corporations, whether it's improving workplace experience or operations, and those things really need to be more hand in hand because they can benefit each other with less overlap. And then honestly, to me, it's like pushing it on decarbonization or energy savings alone. The thing that I really see as the key point is these types of tools help you perform better with your day-to-day operations, how your buildings are performing, how your equipments are performing. It reduces the fires that you're putting out, which allows you to spend a little bit more time on being able to perform better. And for me, us performing better in the buildings will help us all, because better performing buildings will reduce our energy demand, which is the easiest way to reduce our carbon footprint.
Cool. Raj?
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of hurdles depending on the context, right? But one of the major things that I've seen in different companies is you talk about this like an incentive alignment problem, but most of the portfolio operations are kind of siloed, right? Every building has a budget and a team responsible to operate. So they're not really thinking about on a portfolio scale and what is really required at that building level gets, you solution very narrowly, right? So that is one of the biggest hurdle that, and also like thinking about some of these use cases and mindshare on about a need for such a thing. In reality, when you actually deploy a cloud architecture like this, it becomes your software infrastructure that you can build upon over the next few years, maybe decades, and add use cases on top, right? So that kind of a very long-term, broader first principles based thinking is probably missing.
Awesome. I think that's about all the time we have. Thank you to Linden, Raj, and Brian, and for ASHB for having us.
Appreciate it, James. Thanks so much. And I'll actually kind of take over here. My apologies, Raj. Did you want to say something?
No, I just said thanks, everyone.
No problem. Well, as James has mentioned, thank you to our panel members for this informative discussion and for sharing all your expertise on this, ever-growing subject. And for James, thank you for moderating today's session. That was great. So I'll kind of take over here. Bob Allen has unfortunately had to step off today, so I'll just quickly share my screen as we finish off our meeting here with some last minute housekeeping here. So I think we'll just quickly hand it over to Chris Larry, who will just give a quick review of the CABA podcast. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Marta, thank you very much. And thanks for the speakers that did a great job talking about that. The ASHB podcast, ASHB Smarter Homes and Building podcast is steadily gaining momentum and attracting a growing audience. It was originally planned as a quarterly release, but now we seem to have more monthly schedule. And we want to thank everyone, all our members and the people out there who are very enthusiastic with their engagements and support with each installment. ASHB is continuously seeking both hosts and guests to contribute to the podcast. If this opportunity intrigues anyone that's on the call today, please do not hesitate to reach out to us through the email on the screen, admin@ashb.com. We encourage you to tune in to our two most recent episodes, which delve into subjects like building decarbonization, critical environments, as well as smart buildings and smart cities and their investors. Additionally, you can explore more recent recorded episodes on our website at ashb.com. That's all I have, Marta.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Chris. And we will now turn it over to Ken Wax to go over the ASHB Journal and shortly after a quick update on the white papers.
Thank you, Marta. I want to give you a broad sweep of the fundamental way that ASHB fulfills its mission for educating the community members. We provide a compilation of papers that have been vetted to be of particular interest to this community. We survey papers published outside of ASHB. We develop our own papers, and we have papers that have been carefully developed by members for publication in our journal. So let me start at sort of the top of the mountain is our carefully constructed ASHB papers. We invite members to write papers, including graphical elements, photos as appropriate for the paper for publication in the ASHB Journal. The journal is available publicly at ashb.com. Under research, you'll find the journal. I have been convinced that this is a very good technical outlet for the information relevant across the broad sweep of ASHB members, whether it's in the home systems or intelligent buildings. And I personally have been writing for the ASHB Journal and its predecessor, the CABA Journal, and iHomes and Buildings and the CABA Quarterly. And my contributions go back into the 1990s to the beginnings of CABA. the predecessor to ASHB. So I invite anyone to speak with Marta and speak with Greg Walker, the CEO, to determine what papers would be appropriate and how to structure the paper. Marta is very accommodating in helping you prepare the paper and make sure it appears well online. The second method for getting the word out to the industry is the white paper subcommittee, which I chair. We've been doing this for more than 10 years. We solicit proposals from within the IBC, and we generally have the proposer to chair an ad hoc committee. We invite others to contribute to the development of a white paper specialized for topics within our industry. Our recently published paper is Fire Alarm Systems in Smart Buildings, a primer on fire and life safety systems. I recently reviewed the final version of this paper, which has now been published, and I found this to be a very good introductory paper to fire alarm systems. I was particularly impressed that it starts with a real broad sweep history of fire detection, and I was amazed to learn that fire detection started more than 1 million years ago. So this paper does an excellent job in covering the history and the best practices in this area. So we invite people with ideas for white papers within IBC to come forward and let Marta know, and she will work with me to organize a committee to help you develop it. So you have to, whoever proposes it, we hope you take the lead, but it's not doesn't have to be a one-person show. Finally, we call the trade and trade press for articles that are particularly relevant through the ASHB Publication Review Committee. I chair this committee where we ask all our members, if possible, to review 5 papers a year. And we have a reviewer checklist where you provide a brief abstract, about a 100-word abstract for the paper. You check off what segment of our industry it's relevant for, how current the paper is, and then you select a group of keywords to make the library searchable. We have thousands of papers we reviewed and made sure that they were relevant for you. So we will reject papers that are either off topic for homes and buildings, or that are particularly pushing one particular point of view. Now, this does not preclude you from writing a paper and mentioning, for example, your company's contribution. So if you write a paper that says, here's the problem, here are the many solutions, and by the way, my company XYZ has this following solution, that's fine. If you start the paper by saying, here's the problem, there's only one company in the world that solves it, and it's my company, we look a little askance at that. So CABA provides you many opportunities to educate the industry and tell us about technology area, tell us about your products. So look forward to your contributing. By the way, if you do review a paper that for the Publication Review Committee, we will give you a little reward in terms of $25 US plus $25 credit to any ASHB product for sale. So thank you very much, Marta, and hope you'll convince our members to roll up their sleeves and contribute.
Thanks so much, Ken. I hope so too. So now we'll just quickly go over some new business. So this is an opportunity for anyone on the call, if they have any new business, new keynote ideas, white paper ideas, projects to discuss, or agenda items. Please note you can also send those ideas to admin@ashb.com. But if there's anything relevant that you'd like to discuss right now, you could certainly unmute yourself and suggest something. So I'll give it a few seconds.
Yeah, this is David Katz. I put in the chat So the Green Building Initiative, which is a member of ASHB, and it goes to our decarbonization. They're developing the new Green Globes benchmarking tools that go both for energy reduction, but also for decarbonization. And they're looking for public input. So I put the link in the chat, then people just have to register. They send you a form. They show you what they're thinking about the scoring as it relates to these two programs. And Green Globes is widely used through North America and globally. So I just wanted to mention that's in the chat. And we're also looking, Brian had mentioned building envelope, and you know, that's another topic that I think is relevant. And there are a number of companies working on how to improve the building envelope. We made a presentation on this at the building show in Toronto as it relates to windows and roofs and walls, because if we don't insulate, we're not going to be able to replace those fossil boilers. Thank you.
Appreciate that, David. And yes, for those that are on the call, if you can consider contributing to that initiative, the Green Building Initiative. And of course, as Dave mentioned, the link is in the chat.
Marta, it's Michael Grant from Metricus. Charlotte is going to get in touch with some white paper ideas as well, so we can run them by you and put them out there for people to say yay or nay to.
Oh, fantastic, Michael. That'd be great. Yes, please send them our way.
No worries. Well, Charlotte's going to get in touch with you tomorrow. I'll just send her a message while we're on.
Perfect. Perfect.
I just have one other announcement, only because Bob Lane brought it up. So we're doing a building intelligent group Toronto chapter. There are many chapters being formed in the US. ASHB and BIG have an MOU to promote. So we're having our first Toronto meeting for those in the GTA area on August 24th, 6 to 8 p.m. And there's a link that you can find on LinkedIn.
And David, send that over to me as well. And any future meetings.
Yeah, there'll be future meetings. Like it's in the summer vacation time, but we're having our first kickoff meeting. So I'll put that in, and I'll send you some other announcements for the newsletter.
Perfect.
There'll
Yes.
be monthly meetings if the chapter decides.
Excellent. That's good. Yeah. Once you get those details, send them over to us. And I'll give it a few more seconds. If there's anyone else I would like to bring up any new business or make an announcement. All right, with that, we will move along lastly to Mr. Robert Lane.
Good morning.
Good afternoon, sir.
Oh, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I've got 4 things to talk about. There will be a I guess it's over by now. It's oh no, it's September the 10th to the 14th. Bixby will be meeting in Las Vegas. The standards group will be looking, it's really the design, installation, integration of information for the communication technology. A lot of the large technology companies in the telecom industry will all be there. Green Build is coming up in Washington in September. It's focused with the U.S. Green Building Council. The IMF program workplace is in Denver, Colorado. I guess the leading speaker at that will be Erin Brockovich. She was, as you well know, the lady that started the groundwater pollution problem with PG&E back, I guess, 30 years ago. And then last of all, we'll be having the Canadian Building Show in Toronto from the 29th to the 1st of December here in Toronto. So 4 events coming up. Hope to see all of you there. And unfortunately, I'm going to miss Bixby this year. So
thanks so
that's
much,
it.
Robert. And ASHB will be vendors, if not at all 4, at least at 3 of these, we will have a booth. So please, if you are attending, come by and say hello. And I think that brings us to the top of the, well, I should say hour and a half. we are looking to host our next IBC meeting with a keynote in November. The date hasn't been solidified just yet, but we'll be looking to solidify that over the next week or two. So if you are part of the IBC, if you're a member of ASHB and you're part of the IBC, you'll receive a calendar invite to that. And with that, I will end it off. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again to all of our panel members.